Good morning and welcome to Nerd Summit and welcome to our talk, AI in the hiring process. I just want to give you a little background. So we talked about, we've hired several people, like 5 or 6, in the last year, and we noticed a real difference towards the end of last year in the submissions, in the people, and just everything. And so we wanted to talk to people about it as either whether you're applying for a job or you might be hiring in the future. We talked about making this panel, but that implied like we knew something and we weren't really comfortable with that. So it is kind of panel-like. It's very casual what we were going to talk about. So don't hesitate to ask questions. Hopefully we'll have your answers. Okay, so we're all from Last Call Media, and these are the values that we look for in the people that we hire and have as employees. Hi, come on in, you're fine. And so my name is Heidi Stanclift, and I am with some of my coworkers here that have been part of different hiring processes. Do you want to just say your name and what you do?
I'm Buxton. I'm a lead account strategist at Last Call Media, and I also work for an unemployee experience on people as well.
I'm Gretchen Duhaime. I am our leader of finance operations and employee experience. So it's on me to help our teams get great people.
I'm Heidi Stanclift. I am a delivery manager for the company.
I'm Lynn Schumman. I'm a lead developer at Last Call, and I started when the company was small, Drupal only, and
in person.
watched it grow, and in person.
Yeah.
Until now, we're fully remote.
Yeah, that's a great intro. So, so Last Call is 10-ish years old. Started.
If you count to left click, it's older, but yeah.
Okay. I don't go back that far. I've been here 3 years. So there used to be a physical location in Northampton. Went fully remote in 2017 before all the cool kids did it. And then 2020 we hired our first international employee. So that's who we are.
Our team is about, 25% international, and the rest are spread across 14, soon to be 15 states in the U.S.
So I'll learn things today too. I'll let Gretchen talk about these.
Yeah, so I look at hiring initiatives as a process of mutual selection. So we want to make sure that our candidates are learning the information that they need to know to be able to choose us as their next employer. And we also need to learn the information to determine whether or not they're a good cultural fit, aligned with our values, and if they have the skills and experience. We use competency-based framework, but they have the competencies to be able to perform what we need, the reason that we're hiring. So we try to make this as light as possible. So like if I get an email from somebody that's like, I'd love to schedule time on your calendar, which is, career advisors tell you to do that. I always tell people not to do that because it's disrespectful of time. We try to not waste anybody's time with talking too soon. So we start off with a light touch. We get to know people. We get more information as we go. It's kind of the same approach I take with marketing. You don't want to like jump right into to asking people for their, all of their information on the first touch when you meet them. You kind of want to warm up to people. And so in our hiring process is very inclusive. We have a hiring initiative now where we've opened it up to it's global. We don't have any restrictions for people needing to be in the US like we do with some of our client work. And so we're able to broaden the hiring pool, be completely inclusive. We post to diverse job boards like diversity jobs, LGBT jobs, Women Who Code is another one we use a lot. We post to Out in Tech. Yeah, and people of color in IT. So in our hiring process, we also, if we can, we find personal identifying information during the screening process. Sometimes we can't do that because we need to know their location, which is technically DII. And yeah, so I think I touched on the other points. So do you want to say anything else about inclusive? You had more to say about inclusive, I think.
Yeah, I think we're, in this talk, we're talking about AI and the impacts it's had on the hiring process. And so there's obviously some bias that you're going to get from AI algorithms and like where they're getting their information from tends to skew the way things might be filtered, and so it's just something like we're aware of in the like first of all like as an applicant something to be aware of, and then also if you're on a hiring team something to be aware of. So like doing your research if you're looking for a platform specifically, some different platforms have different issues that come up for them in terms of how the information is filtered. So you want to like look into that when you're choosing. We're pretty small, so we do everything's pretty in house. So we'll speak from like in terms of our team size, what that's like. But if you're doing a much bigger recruitment effort, make sure you're looking into your platforms.
Yeah, humans have implicit bias, which means AI has implicit bias.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one other thing that we do in our screening to be inclusive is to not rely on resumes as much as other places might. We use a questionnaire on the application where people self-rate on the competencies that we're asking for, whether they're novice, proficient, or expert, and then tell us how many years of experience they have with the particular things that we're looking for. Usually it's technology or other types of stuff like that. And so that's, we recognize that people have nonlinear career paths. They come from many, expertise can be developed in many different ways and not just from going to college and having a job in the field. I think that's all I'm saying.
Yep. So now
Go on about that for a
I
long
know.
time.
I'm starting to hear things we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is we've just picked 3 hires that we've done in the last 12 months and talk a little bit about how we hired, our process, and what the results were, and share that with you. So our first one was hiring a new delivery manager in May of last year. Do you want to talk a little bit about the process?
So Ange was moving to a new role, and so we needed to replace them in what they were doing. So we had someone else leave, so we hired 2 people.
Yes.
So we were looking for someone to manage client projects and be just that like a really great point of contact partner with our clients in the higher ed and nonprofit space primarily. And so in our application, we did do resumes on this one. We didn't take them into we didn't use them as part of our evaluation criteria, but they were available as information and people wanted to look at them. And like I said before, we had our application with the rating and the years of experience. And then for our first screening, we used something called an Ask Us Anything email. And I wish I could remember what book I read this in, but there was this really awesome book about how to hire perfect fit people in the least amount of time possible. Because I was scaling up a startup and had to hire 15 people in 2 months and didn't have time. So the Ask Us Anything email is the best thing that I've ever learned in a hiring process. And so it's an autoresponder. Once you click, you can click in your applicant tracking system, yeah, this person's good, and then it can send them an email and it says, looks like your skills and experience are a fit for our position. We'd love to get to know you more. This is your chance to ask us anything about us, about the role, even our favorite food. And so adding in favorite food thing is something that people realize that we're kind of fun to work with, and they always ask us what our favorite food is. And sometimes people are like, how can all of you have the same favorite food? And I say, well, it's obviously tacos. And then our next step, we did this was the first time we did this at Last Call. Instead of doing a screen with HR or with a smaller team, we did a video.
Yeah.
And so we just had 3 questions that they had to answer in a 5-minute video. And so the way that people respond back with their videos is very telling. If they're like, I can't figure out how to send you a video, and we're a technology company, that's a challenge. And then some of them have we could go to Sundance next year kind of a video.
Yeah, but it was a really nice way to see who people were, because you could tell who was really prepared and who had practiced, it was an interview, and then there's others that were just scattered, and so it was an easy way to select.
It's an easy way to
move
meet.
Forward.
I think one of the people on the hiring staff was like, wow, that was the fastest way I've ever met 20 applicants. That was really great.
Yeah.
And then there are tools that do this, but we don't use those. We let people do it however they want because it puts them on the spot, and we want to give people time, especially, we try to be really welcoming to neurodivergence and understand that putting people on the spot, even, people who aren't neurodivergent, it's not always fun. So we give people time, and we don't have a specific deadline. We meet people where they are. People will be like, when do I need to get this back to you? They're all nervous about it. Just put them at ease.
Yeah.
And then, once we had figured out who we wanted to meet, we set up a first interview with a couple of people. I think Heidi, you were on that team.
Yep. We split into 2 teams, so 2 of us did all the initials and marked, and then
Yeah.
if we wanted a third opinion, we would ask.
Yeah. So look, we haven't really talked about where AI came into this at all.
Yeah.
Not much. There's a couple of people in the Ask Us Anything email. The other thing is that we require fluent English because our clients are all English speaking. And so the Ask Us Anything email, usually before ChatGPT, would give an opportunity to see people's English proficiency. And then I started to notice a lot of these responses are the same, like they're asking the same 3 questions in the same exact wording. And so that ChatGPT was like brand new. I'm like, I think people are using ChatGPT. Ask Us Anything email.
And the other thing to note, we had about 200 applicants.
Yeah.
And that'll be important.
Yes, yeah, the volume. So in November of 2023, we had an opening on one of our client teams for cloud infrastructure engineer, AWS type of stuff. And so we posted it and immediately got 300 applications per night. Overnight. So that was very different from what we had experienced before, and AI is likely the reason that happened. Of course, job markets are shifting. There's maybe more people available, and it is more of a technical role than a project management role. So there are some differences between the 2 roles. But we're also hiring a product manager right now and experiencing the same volume. So I think that's due to people being able to use AI tools to apply for jobs that match their resumes. So we had an unplanned assessment due to that enormous application volume. It's a big lesson learned. This is another AI thing that happened. So our applicant tracking system has all of these, helpful onboarding things that you might see if you ever use software. Things pop up and say, hey, do you want to try this? And one of the things was, hey, do you want to try an assessment? Here's one we think would be good for your role. So I worked with the technical members of our hiring team to determine which of these built-in assessments in our ATS were most applicable to the work that would be done on this. And we sent it out to hundreds of people, and then you get all these responses back, and they're rated based on like a bell curve. And so we've then moved everybody who was like above average to the next step in the process. Then I got an email from a person that said, I would like to withdraw my application from Last Call Media. This assessment is possibly illegal and clearly designed to weed out neurodivergent people. And so I wrote back to her and I said, that is the last thing that we would ever want to do. Thank you so much for telling me that. We will stop using this. We will not use it again. And she was one of our final candidates.
Yeah. And then the other thing.
What was the bias?
The bias was the format of the questions, where it was a pattern recognition assessment, and the way that the information was presented within the assessment was borderline nonsensical, honestly, and just really, but it was. I can see the point that she made, that it was need to weed out.
I actually, when we were, so at the same time this was going on, we were hiring, which is the next slide, a TypeScript engineer. And I was looking, because Gretchen's like, oh, we're using this. So I went and looked at it. I couldn't finish it. I'm like, I don't know what this is. I don't have time for this. But I couldn't finish it. I'm like, I don't understand this. Yeah. And I'm neurodivergent. So I don't know why I could understand it, but it was annoying. And I probably would have walked away too. But I would have walked away thinking it was me. Mm-hmm. Not thinking it could have been the test. Yeah. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
And then Lynn, do you want to talk to the next piece?
I was part of this effort, and one of the challenges is that the people on the developers on the recruiting team are really busy, and we had done a recruitment a couple years before for Drupal where we had a code challenge that you put in GitHub and we would evaluate it, and that was great, but this time we're like, we can't do that for this. So we wanted a way to get as much information as we could without really stressing the developers on the team. But right away, it was kind of overwhelming because we got 200 things and they were all very generic and interestingly much more perfect. 2 years ago, you could look at a cover letter, you could look at a form, you get a sense of the person. This is like, everyone looks amazing. The letters are perfectly written. There's not a single error. And it became really hard to even sort out, like, who is real? Who's a real person here? So that's when we started to make a few adjustments. And Gretchen got involved in some pre-screening. We sent out a form asking just some human questions, like, what are your top things you've learned, or what's your favorite plant, or just to try to get like a sense of the person in there. And that was really new. So
Yeah, so the unplanned HR screening interview was actually as a result of the other hiring initiative that we're gonna talk
Okay.
about in a second, yeah.
but you started screening too for
Yeah.
this,
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
you?
so I
Yeah.
decided that so we started the other initiative after this one, but this one was slower moving, so they had already started interviewing before we had on this job. And due to, I guess, AI,
We can go to the
making
next
people look
slide.
perfect,
Yeah.
we were getting people in first interviews that had absolutely no business being there. They were not a fit they were not necessarily even real people, and we'll talk about catfishing a little bit later. And so I didn't want that to happen with the other jobs, so I'm like,
Right.
I'm just gonna take these, 10 candidates that are moving to first interviews and do like an old-fashioned HR phone screen and ask them to do a 15-minute Zoom call. Which normally I think is a really big waste of everybody's time, but
But it wasn't.
it wasn't in this case.
Yeah.
And there was probably one person out of the 10 that I screened that I felt like, yeah, this person should not, like, I don't think they're even a real person. And two of them that were like, maybe they're real people, maybe they're not, but the rest of them were appropriate to me too.
Yeah. So our next hire was in December, where we were looking for a TypeScript. So this is a combination of two. So because we had to change it, but first time we looked for a TypeScript developer, and we got a whole bunch of applications.
So it was like 400 out of
400.
Yeah. Right, so
Again,
that-
over a long weekend, not even a long weekend, over a regular weekend, and we're like, we don't have time for this. Like, and we know, and it's not that we don't have time for it. We certainly have time for doing the hiring process. We don't have time for weeding. So we had talked about, like, we couldn't use the assessment because we looked at that, and then so that's when Gretchen put in.
Oh, well, no, the first one, I skipped one on the bullet point.
Oh,
The
okay.
first time, so we posted the job twice. The first time we got most of that red bar was from the first time. And so we had, hundreds, like 350 applicants over 4 days. And so then I met with the technical team and was like, how can I help screen these for you? I don't want you guys to have to look at 350 resumes. Like, this is not okay. And so they said, filter out anybody who doesn't have TypeScript, like actually TypeScript, not React, not Nest or Next or what, I don't know the difference. Like, one of them was okay, I don't remember which one. I was like I don't know these technologies, so to help me out here. And so I went through and I just like did I did this manually, I probably could have written a script to do it, to search for whether or not TypeScript was in their resume, like not just in the list of skills, but in the actual bullet points of things that they've done.
Yeah.
And so that was able to weed it down to a couple hundred people.
to still a whole lot.
Yeah, a lot. So
Yeah.
we sent them a code review. So we're like, okay,
Well, but before we did that, in the first pass, we weeded it down, and then we started scheduling interviews.
no, they had to do the code review first.
Not the first time. The code review came after.
Okay.
Yeah. So we had and I scheduled 7 initial interviews for 1 week, of which I said, probably 2 of these people I would have wanted to interview. The others were just incoherent, didn't know what they'd even applied for. And then we said, okay, so we need to fix this part of our process.
Yeah, we had a lot of adjustments.
And
along
then
the
we
way.
did so the developers on the team set up a little code review, and that's what we put out to everybody.
So it had an obvious error.
Yes.
So this was like, somebody's giving you a PR, you have to do it.
Yeah.
Write your comments. And so almost all of them came back, like probably 90% of them came back having just been written by a large language model. And not, so the people didn't have any context for what they were saying, weren't able to correct the mistakes that the AI had put in. And were kind of nonsensical. So there's like some different files, some different, like there's a Cypress file and another file. And
That's actually the
yeah.
assignment.
No, that's in the code review there is
Oh,
too.
okay.
His people were saying things about how the variables should be different, and like this is not my area of expertise, but just watching the
Mine either.
watching the same comments come back over and over about the same mistakes that people were making, and that they were able to see that like it's unusual for this many people to be making these basic same mistakes.
Yeah.
And from the HR seat, I'm like, are we asking too much of these candidates? Like, can we have one of our in-house engineers that's not on this project but knows TypeScript do this assessment so that like I feel better that 100% of the people are failing it and it actually is it's doable. But then we did get some candidates who were able to do it, who noticed that there was one big glaring error in this thing that. And at one point, I'm like, do you guys want me to just not send you the ones that didn't pick up on that? But like, I'm not always going to know if they picked up on it, so that wasn't a good idea.
Yeah, and they didn't. And it wasn't bad to use AI. There's nothing wrong with using AI, but they needed to make it their own. They needed to use that as a tool, like you might use a calculator. You needed to still show your work, as they say. So once we did that, the developers on the team, a couple of them would go through the review of what they was said, and they're like, yeah, we should talk to this person. And so we would have a first interview, and then from that point decide if and most of them that had their first interview had the second interview. And so the second thing was an assignment, and that was a GitHub assignment where they had to do a PR, put it back, share it, things that you need to do the job. Everybody but one after that submitted the assignment was interviewed a second time, and then we made a decision off of that. And I think that was really a good help for us. We did end up, I think we'll talk about it later, but we did end up with a couple of referrals, which are always, for us, it's been our number one good hire. But we can go on. Any questions for anybody? I put some more slides in. Yeah.
I was confused about the code review. You're saying that the submissions that seemed to be AI couldn't solve it, but human developers could?
No, I would say that they had just put it into AI and just submitted whatever it came out with.
But
So
none of the AI submissions caught
the error.
the error.
Wow.
The big red
Yeah.
flag error
Yeah.
that was in the code.
That seems surprising.
Yeah,
That's why I asked if we could have a human do it.
exactly.
So I'm like, if these are all AI, why aren't they catching this? It's weird.
Yeah.
You said a lot of the applicants were fake and not even humans, even on some of the phoners. What is the purpose of someone just sending in a bunch of dummy?
Well, that's really interesting. And Ange found a podcast.
Yeah,
about
but we're actually going to cover that coming up.
that.
I think a lot of applicants use AI as well to submit, and they're
Yeah.
like getting best fit job postings, and it's just kind of auto applying as well.
Yeah.
So it works both ways. It's kind of where like as a recruiter you might use AI to help, but also as an applicant you're gonna use AI to help combat the AI recruit, and then it's just
But
a
I
cycle.
think that's tied to a real person at some point, right?
You would assume.
It's not always. We have some examples of that. We have some examples of
It's
that from
wild.
seeing articles and podcasts online. And we actually had it happen to us. And
Yeah.
we can't confirm that any of the people that you met were not who they said they were, but
Right.
we have examples of applicants who are not.
I appreciate I never finished rewriting this bullet point. This Impersonation of Bounds would be a sick sci-fi novel. Dark Knight Diaries is one of my favorite podcasts. They have this episode called I'm the Real Connor. And I listened to it and I was like, that's an insane story. But it actually then, and a version of it happened to us. So essentially you'll have these firms, I don't necessarily know where they're based out of, but they'll rip resumes from wherever they can find them. And they'll just hire somebody fresh out of college who might have a little bit of knowledge with coding to say like, hey, will you go and be this person? Here's your resume. You're going to go to this interview. We just need somebody who's fluent in English and knows just enough about coding. So that's actually Connor calling right now. His second interview. But they like, so then they'll have like a kid, who just needs a job. They're going to pay, whatever, $40,000 to go pretend to be somebody with a senior resume It's kind of in the same way an agency would work, right? They can bill that senior developer at a much higher rate. It's not even really him. So they do crazy things too, where they'll take the identifying information, they'll look for a listing on Zillow within the same region of what's on the resume, and they'll put that as the address. They'll take the email, they'll add like the number 2, and then it's like gnarly how they
so it's
really
like
spend,
Gretchen
but
Duhaime
that's how they
84
make their money.
Gmail.
Yeah. So that's how they make their money, right? So they spend the time to like vet these resumes, get somebody who's close enough that could like, fake it, and then get hired by somebody as a contractor, and obviously, so if you're a kid fresh out of college, like you're gonna turn down a job like that, and ethically, a lot of folks do end up doing it, but then there are folks who don't, and so then, you got fake senior developer on your team, and it's just like a group of dudes like putting stuff in AI and being like, I don't know,
It's
is
3
that
toddlers in a trench coat.
It's literally a 3 toddlers in a trench coat example.
Who is Kai? Kai is my youngest child, and so we hadn't. I'm answering these Ask Us Anything emails, and usually I do them from within our applicant tracking system, but it's synced to my Gmail. So, and I don't usually see them in my Gmail because once I address them in the ATS, it disappears from my inbox automatically. But I'm scrolling through my Gmail and I see an email from Kai, and I'm like, my child does not email me at work. What is this about? And it's a really strange subject line. So I click it open. And if I had looked at this in the applicant tracking system first, I would not have seen this because I would have only seen the applicant's name. So the applicant's name was something like Dave. And then the email that they sent it to me from, the name in Gmail was Kai. So strange. Why?
Well, and if you hadn't named your child Kai.
Right. I wouldn't have even looked at that. I would have just gone through it in the ATS.
Yeah. So Alex was somebody that we interviewed for the TypeScript. And so our hiring was required that you have to be resident in the U.S. And not in Alaska and Hawaii. And that's just the client saying this is it. And they're not even going to be able to get in. So don't, so we keep asking it over and over. And I know it's ad nauseum, but it's really, I don't want to get to the end, have you quit your job and then think it's going to be okay, because it's not. So Alex was from California. And all the resume looked good. He did use AI, but he was able to speak to it, and so we moved him along. But when we got to the first interview, there was just, I don't know how else to say it. It's kind of like watching a computer generated movie. He was just different, and he looked very young, and he had this, and I'm sure it was a background. And then, so he was able to answer all the questions that we asked, which you could probably all write the questions that we ask if we know what you're going to be hired for. And then I'm like, man, there's just something off. And I'm like, so we've talked a lot about tech. What do you like to do for fun? So when I'm interviewing a nerd, the answers are, I'm a gamer. I never go outside. I like to cook. I play music. What am I missing? Yeah. So, I know the answers too. Yeah. And he's just like dumbfounded. Like, make something up, I don't know. It was so odd. And then I was with Tyler interviewing him. I was like, is that really weird? He's like, I don't think he's real. And it's weird that we're saying things like, I don't think he's real. I don't know who, he was real. Something was there. Somebody was able to answer questions, or were answering for him. It wasn't a
projection like in The Murder at the End of the World.
I don't know. I don't even know.
Somebody with a Snapchat filter on.
Yeah.
That's really happening.
So that was Alex, and one of the things that, it's like, you just have to trust your gut. Like, this is weird. I don't know what it is. I don't have to keep going with this. I have other options, so we're going to.
If your video quality on an interview is not enough, so like if you're doing an interview and the video quality or the audio quality is sketchy to a point where like it's weirding you out, and if you feel like passionate about that candidate, maybe you can try another time if it really is a connection issue. But it's like a huge red flag.
There are people in rural America who have subpar internet. Like, my mom lived in New Hampshire with only hotspot internet. So, like, I get it.
Sure.
But there's other things on top of that than that is.
If the internet's bad during one, it's like, how do you work for a remote tech?
You need to have strong internet to work for us.
And we had that. And on one of our interviews, Gretchen was doing just the initial interview, and there was this one man, and he was like, she's like, you have really bad internet. Are you traveling? Are you in a car? Like, who interviews in a car?
Well, at the beginning, his video was on, and there was a blank wall behind him, and
Yeah.
and then he turned the connection was bad, so he turned off his video, and then his audio cut out, and then he dropped entirely. So I followed up, and I said, if you're performing this interview from your typical work location, your internet is not sufficient for this job. So thank you for your time. And he said, oh, actually, I was bringing my dog to the vet.
I mean, who does that? I mean, unless it's an emergency, and then like normal,
reschedule.
most people would say,
Yeah.
hey, I have emergency.
Yeah.
I need to reschedule. So that was odd. So
So-
who was Catfish by Travis?
Catfish by Travis is, so, Ange had shared the Darknet Diaries, and I read all about Connor, and I thought, I think we've had some of these come in. I wonder if there's a way to tell. So then I had just reached back out to people who hadn't responded back to their code review to be like, hey, are you still interested in this job? We haven't heard back from you yet. And then I was screening new candidates, and I noticed one of them had the same name, and it wasn't like John Smith, and it was Travis something, and like a unique last name. So I pulled up the two resumes side by side, and they were completely different except for the phone number, different email addresses, different work experiences, different education, different locations. And so I just disqualified both of them from the process and moved on with my day. I'm like, I don't think either one of these is the real Travis, so I'm not going to reach out and tell him that somebody's catfishing is him, because I think they're both fake.
So this was a candidate we got for the cloud infrastructure thing, and we're using a system called Workable to screen our candidates. So we have 15 people to look at, and we thumbs up them or thumbs down, which is tricky sometimes. But there was this person, Raya, that I liked, and I asked my coworker, what about this person? He's like, she doesn't seem real. She seems so perfect. There's just something about her that seems like could be AI. So then I asked the other person on the team, and she was the same. She's like, yeah, I don't see a LinkedIn. I don't see a GitHub. I don't know, And there was a lot of discussion about this. We did end up interviewing Raya, and she was, in fact, very real. And she made it to the second thing. But what was interesting about that is, I started my career in publishing, and it used to be that if you had an error, if you had a grammatical thing, a sentence that wasn't worded right, that would throw you out. Now we were just looking for mistakes almost. Like we were looking for realness in the cover letters, in the resumes, and this person was so professional, she almost didn't make it through. So for candidates, you have to sort of balance showing who you are with really showing what you've accomplished.
And have a LinkedIn. I mean, that's just,
Well,
like.
and for cloud infrastructure, lots of people didn't include it, and we also didn't ask for it.
There are people in our company who don't have LinkedIn.
That is
Yes,
true.
there are.
I don't want to hear that right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For candidates who are very clearly real but are looking like AI, who make it through some of the interviews, do you ever tell them that, like, hey, just so you know, if you continue with your job hunt, like, you don't
Yeah.
look like a real person, here's some stuff? Do you
No.
ever give them that feedback?
Some
No.
some
That's a good idea.
interviewers do like to give feedback, and that's something I
Yeah.
know that Karen was like, I tell them, next time do this. It sort of depends on, your experience with interviewing. It's a good thing to do.
Yeah.
I don't give feedback because
Yeah, I know
like
Karen
that's so
does.
much extra work for me to
Yeah.
ask the interviewer and then give it back to the candidate, and then I just don't want to get in a situation where someone feels like we've done something illegal and screen them out for some reason that isn't the real reason that we did. You want me to move on to this?
Sure.
Yeah. So as Lynn mentioned, one of the questions on our questionnaire for the cloud infra engineer was, what's your favorite plant and why? And I think we had asked this for the Drupal, same
Well,
question
yeah,
for the Drupal a few
A
years
couple
ago.
of years ago, we asked if
Yeah.
the JavaScript developer.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I got asked my favorite plant.
Okay, so this was the one I just did recently is what would your entrance music be? Just as telling. So when someone answers it, like not everyone has a favorite plant, so like that's understandable. But every single person answered with a very well crafted multi-paragraph response to what their favorite plant is and why. And we noticed there was a really significant number of people whose favorite plants were aloe and bonsai, and the ones for aloe, except for one person, were almost identical. The one person, it was like there was a reason that his favorite plant was aloe, and he was able to explain it. It's like he's in his home country for lots of different things, not just like we rub it on birds or whatever. Like he had other stuff. And then the bonsai one, I am sitting in my living room screening candidates, and I'm like, if I see another person tell me the exact same thing about bonsai, I'm gonna lose my mind. And my 15-year-old is like, well, if you think it's ChatGPT, just like look. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that. And so he pulls it up and he asks the exact question and he reads me the response and it's literally word for word the same as the application I'm reading.
Yep.
Cool. I'll speak to this, and then also to the question about like, feedback to candidates. I think like there's like a version of the world that I want to live in where there's a moral imperative to help folks, but I think with like in terms of like time and resource, you just gotta be realistic. I think for bigger companies, they're using AI anyway to kind of screen and don't make it through. So then that speaks to like this bias that happens. So we get large language models are fed what they're fed to develop and to decide how you're going to be filtered, and we see it working against people for sure in different ways. There's a really good mini series on this podcast called "In Machines We Trust" that goes into a little bit of like what might happen. One of the examples they gave was in the like machine learning process they were fed a number of real resumes, several different people named Jared who happened to have played lacrosse and were very senior. And so now the machine thinks if you have lacrosse on your resume, you're going to be very senior, and then they like have a bias toward you, right?
Correlation, not
right,
causation.
exactly. And then it starts to go into like, well, what about field hockey? And truly, what about field hockey? But obviously there's flaws, there's errors, there's things that we're still working through. There is like I think it's the equal employment, like there are like guidelines, but it's like unclear exactly. They haven't decided how they want to enforce this stuff yet. But there's guidelines. There's like things that companies are supposed to be following. ZipRecruiter has they're actually pretty. CEO's name is Ian, I forget his last name, but they're like really aware of the push and pull between AI applicants and then AI like recruiting, and like how that's like there's like and he's like this is happening right now. This is real. It's happening right now. So to speak to like the bias in terms of like different platforms, it's like really important that when you're choosing your platform, you look into what's happening. And then also just say this, I didn't say it earlier, in terms of like DEI stuff, a lot of places think I have to build out my diversity first. Don't do that. I mean, it's great if you can, but it takes a very long time. The best thing you can do, and you can start today, is like figure out ways to have more equitable practices within what you're doing. Have your equitable practices in place. Make sure your workplace is inclusive. You can start that today. And then when you are growing into a more diverse team, which you should be trying to do, you're already setting those folks up for success. They're coming into a place where there's something like we have a continuing education budget. It's unlimited. Whatever courses you need, whatever gear you need, that kind of. So like those barriers for access are already down when you join. As maybe someone who's in a minority group, like you want to make sure you're setting those people up for success before they join. Don't start with trying to grow a diverse team. Make sure everything is set up like already. That's
and
that's
don't
how
just have the policies, like make it okay to use them. So when I'm onboarding people, and even before, like when I'm telling them, I'm going to set you up with your ramp card, and you're going to have 2 spend programs, and this is what you should use it for. And then I reinforce that in the first day of onboarding. Like, have you ordered your monitor yet? Do you need a monitor? Do you need a chair? What do you need? To make sure that people know it's okay to use that even on day one. Like no one's going to judge them for it. Like we talk ourselves out of doing things that are in our best interest so many times.
Is there any more questions?
I have one. So when I'm hiring, I like asking, like you said, what's your favorite plant? What's this? But I have had people pull out at that point saying, this is irrelevant to the position.
Sure.
They don't like answering these kinds of questions. And I agree that these kinds of questions are great for making sure someone is real. Or at the very least is taking this seriously enough that if they are using AI, it's only being used as a tool. What's your opinion or what have you seen? Have you seen these kind of candidates that just get frustrated at these kinds of questions?
I can relate to that. I mean, I'm someone that finds those are often the hardest questions. The questions that bring up personality. If you're very extroverted, they're fun. Some of our developers that tend to be more introverted are like, I don't want to talk about that. So it's a balance. I mean, I think in today's work world, especially remotely, you do have to get used to that and have some practice. But
Like,
I mean,
you keep saying that, like, we wouldn't have hired Chris if he had to do this.
yeah, we have
Sure.
some of our best developers are highly introverted, and so I often think, would they have made it through this process?
We don't require people to have cameras on, which is another thing that I think
Right.
is really helpful and inclusive.
Although in our last round, I think because depends on the project, some of our clients now, it's changing as,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, we do still have people on staff who do
Right, like
own webcams.
internally, we don't
Yeah.
have cameras
Yeah.
on. Right.
Yeah.
The interview,
I think
you
you should.
kind of have to.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so it is a balance. I mean, if someone just ran away completely from that question, I'd be nervous. But if someone sort of hemmed and hawed and said, I don't know, I might be like, okay, you're a person, so.
There's a really big difference in the types of roles that we're hiring. So when we were hiring these 2 engineering roles, and my Ask Us Anything email was getting back mostly, yes, I'm interested in this position, or what are the next steps, or what's the hiring process, which was literally in the email I had them right before. And when I would get any other question, I was excited about that candidate. And now we're hiring a product manager, and I sent out 100 Ask Us Anything emails, and I got back 80 responses that all had at least 3 questions that were
Yeah.
matched to. I mean, they could have been ChatGPT. That's fine, but like, what a difference!
Yeah.
I think transparency to the candidates, like you have to know the landscape has changed, and as an applicant, you have to know that we're literally battling robots, and we want to get have a pulse. We want,
Yeah.
figure out a plant and put your snake in it. Yeah.
So we're getting low on time. So based on that, so we have a couple of slides about like what the hiring team can do, because most likely it's not your full-time job. They're research, excuse me, how to sort out applicants. Just watch everything. Trust your gut. If you're asking what somebody's favorite tree is, ask AI what it is. You know, again, AI is not a bad thing. But you just need to, humanize it, and trust your gut. So like when you're asking somebody what their favorite plant is, and they're like, well, "This is bullshit. I'm not going to do it." They're probably not your candidate. So just talk about, see how they react, and say that. And then technology red flags. So internet. Cameras on. I interviewed people that it sounded like he was in the lunchroom. Those are all things that are probably not your candidate that you're going to put in front of your clients. And then make sure your referrals are reliable. Like, there we go, as reliable. Those are we have found they're our most reliable source of people, of candidates.
I think we're all referrals.
I know, yeah.
Yeah,
And then,
most of us.
so if you're applying for a job, stand out by engaging. If you're like, I don't know, I'm an introvert. I know Lynn is.
I'm not.
I know you're not. I don't think Ange is either. But talk to people. And you're probably being interviewed by an introvert, so you have to be able to talk to people, and show you're real. Have your dog bark in the back of your interview, and that you're actually interested. And it's like I said, it's fine to use AI. We would not recommend using AI bots for applying. So like I've had people show up that didn't know what they applied for, and just read off all their skills, and I couldn't understand what they were saying. I couldn't stop them, and it was just horrible. Also, don't force relationships. If you're applying to a company, invariably I can always tell when we have an open slot, because people try to like connect with me on LinkedIn.
They get very popular on LinkedIn.
Yes. I am not that popular. Yeah. And then follow the hiring process for where you're applying. So not everybody is fairly the same, but if somebody's asking you a question, respond to it, because that may be a way to end the process.
Yeah, don't respond to it with "Here's my Calendly link."
Yeah.
I've gotten so many of those this week. Rude.
Yeah. So then we have one more last chance. I got 1 minute. Any more questions? Yeah.
One of the things that I find very difficult about the hiring process is that both sides seem to be like on this race to the bottom of like investing less effort. And one of the things that like I've tried to do when hiring people is like show that I am, like I think the question that was asked before of like people don't want to answer about their favorite plant.
Yeah.
They feel like it's more work being put on them. It's like I try to show like good candidates that I'm investing in them early in the process before I ask a lot of work
Yeah.
from them. But like it is very difficult to balance like
Yeah.
the are there things that you found that like are helpful where like you can invest time show good candidates that you're investing in them before you ask a lot from them without wasting a lot of time on like bot submissions?
Yeah, so when, like just the transparency at every step of the process, it's, you know, I update my Ask Us Anything email every time because I've learned things from the previous one about information that's helpful. Like telling people why they were selected. So sometimes it's not enough to just say your skills and experience look like a match. Like I might expand on that a little bit in the next one. It's an autoresponder still, but just to give them like how we decided that their skills and experience were a match. And it's literally just you filled out the application and had all the things that we needed you to have. And then you know, so every single step we're getting a little bit deeper on both sides. And I think that's the piece that's really key is that we're not jumping right into something that's a lot of burden for them. We're not.
Right.
So one of the things that we thought about doing was giving people an assessment at the front end of the process. And I pushed back on that a lot because I feel like that is, you know, jumping to proposal before you've had your first date.
Right.
And so the assessment should come at the very end, and if it's really intensive, it should be paid.
Plus, we're trying to keep it light,
Yeah.
and somebody has to review those assessments. And
And to your point, yeah, exactly.
you know, and the other thing is like, so like we're really committed to closing the process. Like we got your application, we interviewed or not, you're not a fit or you're hired. I had a son coming out of grad school a few years ago and he was applying to things and he's in forensic science and he was applying to all kinds of different systems and he would always get grumpy on Friday and I finally realized what it was. Friday is when the no thank you letters come out. Without any acknowledgement that they'd received their application, that they were even being considered, they just had to clear their desk. So it's like, I don't want anybody else to have, grumpy Fridays, because it's Friday. It's like a hospital. We gotta clear our beds. It's the weekend.
Yeah, we acknowledge every step of the way. We acknowledge that we received your application. We acknowledge when we receive your Ask Us Anything email. If we don't have time to respond to it right away, we acknowledge every single step.
Yeah.
And everyone gets a final determination. And I
Yeah.
tell them how long it's gonna take for each step. Like, you'll hear from us within this amount of time,
Right.
whether or not you're selected for the next step.
Right. And we have had candidates where like I felt like they were waiting. It's like, well, we had this final interview. It's on Tuesday. It's Friday. Again, Friday. I'm like, well, you know what? I'm gonna email him and I'm just gonna say, you know what? We're still, as you know, because we told you we're inundated with AI submissions. You're still in the running. We just wanted to like touch base and say, don't panic yet.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we ended up not hiring him, but he was aware throughout the whole process. So, all right, we're over. But thank you very
So
much.
Thank you.
Yeah.